direction. We're going to stop this idea of cap and trade, delivering tax without a mouth. The quickest way to challenge this growth in government in areas that government is not supposed to grow in would be to send a very strong message across the country. And we have that opportunity here in the 5th Congressional District because our current legislator is the majority leader in the House. We have not had positive and strong, moderate, conservative representation in this district for quite some time. And I said to myself that if it's not me, then who? And if it's not now, then when? I've often told my daughters that the only way evil can prevail is when good people do nothing. And we have enough people in our nation that are framed, that believe in patriotism, that believe in our conservative values, that we have an opportunity. If I decide to stand now and pull my britches up and get this thing done, we can stop an otherwise explosive agenda from happening in our country, and we can win our country back. Can you imagine the excitement across this country on November the 3rd when both the majority leader in the House and Senate are sent home? Very strong message. So to that end, I decided this is the right time, and this is the right place, and this is an outstanding opportunity. As long as we can stay to our values, maintain our integrity, hold our feet to the fire, and I can get a couple of constituents to join in with me to do likewise. That was almost a year ago, about 11 months ago now. And now we have just under 200 volunteers, so a whole lot more than 2 or 3 constituents that are supporting me, that are supporting us, that are holding us accountable. And I feel like we can do what some people thought was the unthinkable. We can bring our district representation that it desperately needs and change an otherwise socialized agenda, push that thing back, do away with a terrible socialized health care bill, and renew freedom and constitutional values back to our country. So that's my side. Now, the meat and potatoes of why I'm running, there's only 3 pieces I want to introduce to you, and then I'm ready for some difficult questions. And the harder the better. The worst I'll say to you is I don't know. So make sure you're ready for that. There are 3 things that I believe we ought to absolutely look at that we're going to ensure that our nation has, in my opinion, its legs, its feet, its constitutional bearing back given to it. Number 1 is the economy. The economy, the economy, the economy. Jobs is the ever-present issue. When you elect me to represent you and serve you in Congress, you're not electing someone that's going to Congress to create jobs. That is not my responsibility, nor is it the job of any congressman or U.S. senator to create jobs. Our job is to ensure the atmosphere of freedom and democracy is in place so you as businessmen and women can create jobs and opportunities and be inventive. That is the responsibility. Anytime you hear somebody get behind a podium and say, look how many jobs the government has created, you ought to get nervous as a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs and say, this is not the right way to go. Government should not be involved in creating jobs, because when government creates jobs, guess what? It's your tax dollars paying for those jobs. So you didn't create a thing. You just added more of your money to pay for what they're doing. However, if government would do what it's supposed to and focus on remaining small, passing responsibility to states and otherwise individual rights, making sure that tax breaks, cuts, are given for businesses, to trust in them so they can open up their wallets, their hearts, their innovative spirits, to hire and put people back to work. I've heard so many say that that theory doesn't work, but it does. And for our democracy, it is the only thing that can work, because the otherwise notion is to allow government to do it, and that simply is not right. Taxation is out of control. I have signed several tax pledges that will hold our campaign's feet to the fire, that we will not pass one bill or sign off on one bill that increases taxes. And I'm going to tell you why. It's because revenues in our country are not the problem. The expenses are the problem. It's not the revenue. We don't have a revenue problem. We have an expense problem. And I absolutely can prove it. I hope to get the opportunity with Q&A to show you that and kind of roll out some stuff, some real solutions to the problem. If I came home, or if this gentleman right here came home, you married, sir? Outstanding, you're a perfect person to use. This gentleman walks home, and he and his wife, between the 2 of them, they make $2.5 million a year. You probably didn't know that. If you need to borrow some money, he's here. He's available. Relax here in the front. And he comes home and he says, well, honey, problem because I want to buy a new car. And although they bring in $2.5 million in revenues, they have about $2.5 million in expenses. So every year they net about $500 to $1,000 a year. Some of y'all thinking the same thing I'm thinking. If the revenues are $2.5 million and the expenses are $2.5 million, how in the world can we buy a new car? And the wife is thinking the same thing, because this wife is very frugal. And she's a little bit distrusting of this whole idea that her wonderful husband's come home with. So she looks back at us and says, honey, we can't afford it. He looks back at her and says, absolutely we can. Although we're going to go on debt about $40,000, we will actually make money, almost $75,000 over 7 years if we buy this new car. How many in the room believe his wife's going to go with him? How many in the room believe he's going to sleep on the couch tonight? Absolutely. Because he knows as well as she knows that no matter what kind of idea you come up with, if you don't have the money there, you shouldn't spend the money if you don't have it. Now, we all know making $2.5 million a year probably means he does not have a revenue problem. He's bringing in a lot of money. But the problem is the expenses. It's the same for the federal government. Somebody looked at the camera and told us that this health care package would save us a couple $1 billion over 5 years. Well, they're finding out the truth now. That actually going to cost us more like $9.5 trillion over 13 years. Because they are just finding out what we already knew. That you can't look at projected numbers and try to decide that you're going to have a surplus based upon what you're projecting for taxpayers to do. See, we weren't stupid. We realized that the only way the money was going to come in for them to do this program is if our tax dollars paid for it. They didn't understand that down there. It's almost like once they got elected to Congress, they left half their brain on the other end of 95 before 95 came down there. I don't understand it, that they forgot basic math. We cannot continue to tax citizens. They also think that the more taxes that they levy on citizens, that's the way to get us out of the debt and out of deficit. What they don't realize is that's how we got ourselves into this deficit, by increasing taxes. And just in case you're middle class, like me in this room, get ready in January, because you're going to be hit with a very hard tax increase when the Bush tax cuts expire. You don't have to take my word for it. Just wait a little while longer, and you'll see it. By allowing these tax cuts to expire, it's going to hurt the middle class more than any other class in our nation, thus proving a basic distruth that was given by both my opponent as well as the current administration, which they will be held accountable for a whole lot sooner than later. I'm thinking November. There is the final issue of global versus national economic focus. And I've heard many different debates on this idea that, hey, Charles, we're a globalized economy. So there's certain things we have to look out for and do, et cetera, because we're now trading, we're now opening businesses overseas. A lot of our businesses and business owners are looking into distributions and manufacturing sites overseas. We're a globalized economy. What happens here will very much impact globally. I have a problem. I have a problem when we import more than we export. I have a problem when you can't even buy a television that's made in America. It's not a racist statement. I just have a problem with it. I have a problem when every electrical device upstairs in my children's room is made somewhere outside this nation and not in this nation. Now, my daughters seem to think, because they know how conservative I lean, I took their iPods away from them. And I took their cell phones away from them. And a couple of my daughters came up with this harebrained idea that I took it away from them because they weren't made in America and I'm holding them hostage. When the reality is, I just want to be able to talk to my child without something stuck to her ear all the time. But I'll let her believe that. I'll let them believe it if they want to. We have got to re-establish and reinvent ourselves in our nation and look for the next big opportunity for us to economically come alive. And we have to start by looking at our national footprint first. I'm not saying that we ignore globalization, not at all. But I am saying that we present ourselves in our country and put ourselves in a position which a congressman and the U.S. senators can absolutely do to make sure the landscape is conditioned well for businesses to bring those jobs back home. We need them home, and we need them here. And the whole idea, the entire notion that illegal immigration needs to be left in place because we don't have any Americans that will take entry-level jobs is absolutely repulsive. I don't like it. I think it's wrong. Don't know how you feel about it, but when I grew up, they taught me, my mom and dad taught me that entry-level jobs was the beginning rung of a climbing ladder upward to success. So if you